Hello all. Welcome to the UK Deaf Leadership Summit, the webinar series. This is the first event of 2024. And so we've had previous series, and this is the first of this year. So today we have Brent Phillips with us, and he is Chief Impact Officer for Deaf Connect. That's an Australian deaf organisation. So welcome, Brent.
Wonderful. Thanks for having me, Craig, and it's great to be here.
Brilliant. So, Brent, um, we've got a list of questions about leadership, deaf leadership, what inspired you, and what brought you to the passion. So I'm looking forward to hearing your answers. So I'll start with the first question. Um, Obviously, you're very well known in Australia and in America, um, but not so well known in the UK. But maybe we can add more to that later. So, can you tell us about what started your journey into deaf leadership? How young were you when you started?
No worries. Well, it's great to be here with you all. I'm going to be using Auslan, which is quite similar to BSL, but you might see me mixing the two languages, but I'm sure we'll be fine over the next hour. So my journey really, it starts with my family and my community at big aspects of my life. I have deaf parents and grandparents. So I grew up within the deaf community, regularly attending our local deaf clubs and seeing deaf leaders around me my whole life. So really that has played a big part in terms of my career as a deaf leader. I've been heavily involved in the deaf community, in sports, on various committees with different organizations. I've always played a role throughout my life within the community at different levels. Lots of people strongly believed in me and gave me opportunities and really opened doors for me and were quite encouraging and have been throughout my whole journey. I'm quite lucky that the community and family have been a big part of my life, both personally and professionally.
So you've got many generations of deafness in your family. So having that strong influence there, I can imagine was a big factor. So you've described being on committees and so forth. So, but could you tell me what has your career been like? Um, what has been the highlights of your career?
So my career has been a mix of working within deaf communities and mainstream organisations. My skills and experiences have really made me who I am in terms of working for deaf community organisations and mainstream organisations. And I strongly encourage people to consider that with their professional trajectory. I started off working for an organisation called Deaf Victoria, which is a state-based um, organisation in Victoria, which is a state of Australia. At the age of 19, I became a manager there for that organisation. Looking back on that, I was very young to take on that role at the age of 19 and be leading a small advocacy organisation. I then moved into government, then came back to the deaf sector, and then moved to the UK, where I lived for 2 years, which is how I met you first, Craig, and the community there. I worked for DSN, so Deaf Support Network. I believe it's still the same name now, if I'm right, Craig.
I think it's the same acronym, but a different name. I think they have changed slightly, but yes, in the northwest of England.
Yes, Northwest. So I was there supporting the community in a support worker role. When I came back to Australia, I had the opportunity to work when the 2005 Deaf Olympics came to Australia. That was an incredible experience for me, having so many people from across the globe come to my home, our city in Melbourne. I then worked for government after that and then returned to the deaf community and worked for a deaf society, which is called Expression Australia. Similar to England, you have the structures of deaf societies. We have a similar model in Australia. I worked for that organisation for 8 years in Melbourne. Then I moved to government, and then now I've come back to the deaf community and worked for Deaf Connect. So you can see I've traversed both spheres of the professional world.
Yeah, a huge variety, and having that experience of the mainstream world and the deaf world must have made it very interesting. I've got more questions on that to come later, actually. But you've talked about growing up in the deaf community, and I'm sure that meant you had role models to look up to and mentors for you. Maybe you can tell us a bit more about who those were, and who inspired you.
Yes, I've mentioned my family were played a significant role in who I am, but one particular person that I really looked up to was a gentleman by the name of John Lovett. I think you know him, Craig. He was the president of World Deaf Sports, or CISS, which is now ICSD, International Committee of Sports for the Deaf. He was based in Melbourne. My father and John were best mates. So I saw him regularly on the weekends at family events, and he was an incredible leader. He worked for the Deaf Society as a manager. He then led Deaf Sports Australia as a president of their board, and then progressed to represent deaf sports at that international level. We both support the same football team, so we regularly go to the football together and developed a great relationship. And he passed away, unfortunately, at the age of 60, which is very young. It's been disappointing that he hasn't been able to observe my own professional journey over the past 20 years, but he really is a person I looked up to, and he really believed in me. He gave me a lot of advice, helped me navigate those years of my life.
It's not a surprise that I mean, John left a legacy. He inspired me too. So yeah, I'm not surprised. And that's so lovely. Whatever influence or mentorship they've provided, that's still with you to this day. So they're still there in spirit. Really powerful. So yes, I can definitely see that. That leads me on to, I'm sure, John Lovett is one of those, but are there, I mean, you've talked about committees and work. What are there any specific inspirations that made you want to become a leader?
Are you asking who or what qualities, perhaps, that I observed?
Yeah, something inside you that thought, yeah, I can be a leader. What had an impact on you to think, yeah, I can do this?
I would say there wasn't one particular moment that I can pinpoint. I would say it was a general progression. Growing up, I saw leaders all around me, and really, I feel as I have taken on the qualities of those different leaders. And I had people that believed in me. I Deaf Victoria, that organisation I mentioned that I joined at the age of 19, the small advocacy organisation, they were advertising for a manager at the time. And I thought, at the age of 19, is this really something that I would be suitable for? The president of the organization at the time, her name was Anne Darwin. Do you know her, Craig? Okay.
Oh yeah, blast from the past.
Wonderful. Do you remember the TTY technology back in the day, in the old days? We had a conversation over the TTY. I said, should I apply? And she said, look, Brent, you've got nothing to lose. So I applied, had an interview, and I got the job. And looking back on that, it was nice to have someone that believed in me and encouraged me to take on that opportunity. And I think I've had people throughout my life that have given me that belief, and have built me into the leader I am now.
And I think that takes confidence as well. Um, somebody having a belief in your qualities and your capabilities, and yeah, your qualities. And you can start very raw, obviously, and but somebody has to have a belief in you, and that has an impact on you. And sometimes without you even realizing, it takes you on your journey. So we mentioned the journey. I want to jump right forward to where you are now. So your title, Chief Impact Officer. Can you tell us what that title means, and why is it important to use the word impact?
Yes, so the title Chief Impact Officer is fairly new. We're seeing it become more regular. I guess Prince Harry was the first person that I saw use it. When he moved to America, he received the title of Chief Impact Officer. I forgot the reason for it, but I believe it was for a particular organization. And looking into that further, the concept of impact really interests me. Deaf Connect had a vacancy, a job they were advertising. They made contact with me to see if I was interested. And throughout my negotiations, I thought that word impact really suits this job. A lot of it was about policy, government, partnership, projects, stakeholder management. It was about creating positive impact on the deaf community. So I explored that job title as a suggestion with the organization, and they were supportive of that. So that's been my role for the past 3 years. My work is all about impact. Anything we do must have a positive impact on the community. And the focuses are youth, leadership, the deaf ecosystem, and policy and government relations. That all falls within my remit and the impact that it has on the deaf community.
That's really interesting. I hope you don't mind me adding that title, CIO, Chief Impact Officer. Um, it's not widely known within deaf organisations in the UK. Maybe there's the start of it out there, kind of floating that idea. So your role is more about encouraging the mainstream, the public, Parliament, and making them aware of the deaf community. And is it campaigning or is it more about corporate relations?
Yes, well, Deaf Connect, we are a service provider, and that is the history of the organization, a large service provider. The organization has merged or acquired different organizations over the years and has grown into very large organizations. It's financially strong. The decision was made to invest in an impact team, and the impact team really is two focuses: one on the deaf community, so building capabilities, skills, and supporting the community in a variety of ways through projects such as deaf history projects, camps, youth leadership. And then the other side is the mainstream community, making sure they understand and can include the deaf community in their everyday, day-to-day lives. We have many different relationships with government to enable that. That might be through service contracts or relationships. And we use those opportunities to constantly remind about the importance of access for deaf community. We're not an advocacy organisation, but we're able to influence and shape policy and thinking to make sure the broader community and government are more inclusive of the deaf community.
Thank you. That's really interesting to know what you're doing now. So, we've talked about where you started and where you are now. So let's go back a little bit. So let's look at the term leadership. And obviously there's different characteristics of leadership. So, if we pick integrity as one, just throwing a question in there. What does integrity mean to you as a leader?
The word integrity.
Integrity, yeah.
Okay. I think for me, it is that you can sleep at night and you know throughout your day you've done the right things for the community and you've made the right decisions. And sometimes there are hard decisions that need to be made, but you know they're the right decisions. So you can go to bed and reflect on your day and the decisions you've made, that you've honored yourself, you've honored the community, and you've honored your workplace. That would be my response, yeah, to that question.
Yeah, I'm laughing, but do you really sleep that well at night?
Yes, most of the time I do, Craig. Look, there are sleepless nights, of course, sometimes, but I think it's that gut feel, where when something feels right, you need to honor that. That's really important.
I agree. I think integrity is quite a powerful word, and not many people realize it. But what you said about honesty and about, um, if you want to achieve something, that's fine. But looking at the situation, knowing whether it's good or bad, but you have to kind of have the resilience to go through with it, but hold your head up high still, whether it goes well or not. So what you've said is really interesting. That perspective on it is a really good answer. Right. If we move on, so we've talked about your journey so far, your career journey. So I did want to pick up on your work here in the UK for 2 years. So I'm wondering if we can talk more about that. So you've worked for local, regional, national, international, of course, organisations. You've been the president of Australian Deaf Sports Australia. You were involved in the Deaf Olympics work behind the scenes. So a rich experience you've had. So the question I'm asking is, I mean, I do remember you when you weren't saying you're not saying you're a baby, but you were young. You worked for DSN. I think they've changed their name now to Sensory, Deaf and Sensory Network. So it's still DSN. So it keeps the same initials. So, um, what's been your most outstanding moment, do you think, in your deaf leadership journey? What what has struck you as maybe unique, significant, memorable as part of your leadership journey?
Yeah, one story I'll share about my experience at DSN. In Australia we have the working holiday visa. Many of my friends were traveling up to England, working there for 2 years, partying, all the rest of it. I was unsure if I should travel to London or to outside of London. There were two job interviews I had. One in London and one with DSN. At the time, it was 2001, and there were really bad floods in the UK that year where you couldn't drive. So I flew to Manchester and then had my interview. And then there was a deaf festival in Newcastle. So Helen Reed, that's a sign name if I remember that correctly. She was sitting next to me. We shared a car ride. And in the car, we were having a conversation. It was about a 6 hour drive up to Newcastle, if I remember that.
3 hours there,
And
3 hours back.
okay, yes. And she was really encouraging me to take the opportunity at DSN. She was very crafty in her approach there. And, you know, I was able to travel over the weekends into Liverpool and Scotland. And if I stayed in London, I would have only have been in London. So looking back, I think that was a good decision to make for a variety of reasons. But 2 years was it was a wonderful experience over those 2 years. I met great leaders. I met you, Craig. I met Martin Colville,
Mhm.
who was a boss. He was one of my bosses. He was a coder, of course, and he had great belief in me. I still have maintained contact with him over the years.
Yeah, because I used to work for DSN. Obviously, I know Helen. So yeah, it is about for the four corners of England and experiencing those. You've got obviously England, Scotland, Ireland, Wales. So yeah, it's about, looking at inner and outer London as well and widening your horizons. Yeah, so 2 years must have been full on, lots of learning before you went back to Australia. But maybe the cultures are similar but different. So in some aspects we're ahead, some aspects we're behind. It's like America and Europe. Sometimes they seem way ahead, but in some areas behind. I don't know um, how Britain and Australia compare now, but are there still similarities? Do you think? I mean, America and Europe seem quite similar, but I don't know how you feel Australia fares.
I think it's interesting. The UK and Australia have fairly similar structures. Our histories of the societies were established by missionaries. So there's that the roots in religion and the act of assisting the deaf community. in Australia, we have 7 states, and there were 7 distinct deaf societies. Over the years, it's become a lot more commercial. We've seen 7 deaf societies reduced to just 2. And I think similarly in the UK, you're seeing some of those changes. So leadership skills aren't just about knowing the community. You must have business acumen, you must have business skills, the ability to work with government. Those sort of skills you didn't necessarily need 50 years ago. So Australia now, we're in the middle of a significant shift. The community still have fond memories of the way things were with deaf clubs and those deaf societies. In America, I think, is just a completely different world. There's no such thing as deaf societies there. It's just commercial businesses. So I see the similarities between Australia and the UK.
I do agree with you. It's very similar here in the UK over the last 20 years. We've seen like a marked change from what it was in that the missionary associations there to support the deaf community, like the local councils giving grants and saying, go on, spend it as you want. And now it's more outcomes based, focus on results now. So yes, becoming more corporate, contracts, and you have to go into competition to win the contracts. I mean, there was very few deaf leaders of deaf organisations 20 years ago, whereas now in the UK we're seeing many more deaf CEOs, much more now compared to 20 years ago. So there's a big difference, we're transforming for the better, but it's becoming more competitive as well. And that's healthy and important, of course, for deaf organisations to have the freedom and to choose which services they want to provide. But of course that raises challenges, and I'm sure it's the same for you in Australia.
Absolutely.
Okay. We could go off at a tangent, but I'll try and move this conversation on back to leadership. So what is a good leader is the question. So is it problem solving? What do you think are essential leadership qualities? If you can talk about that.
Look, for me, what comes to mind instantly is authenticity. To be real. You can be a strong leader, but a vulnerable leader. And you need to know what your strengths and weaknesses are. And you need to be real and authentic about who you are. As well, it's important to have a finger on the pulse. You need to know when you should lead from the front and when you should lead from the back. So there are different situations and different moments where you have to really read the room and know what style of leadership is applicable at that particular time. And leadership is about working in a team, and that comes with the need to collaborate. It's not always easy working with people. There are different personalities, egos, values, priorities. So it's about how you can work together effectively and ensure that goal is clear for everybody, which isn't always easy. But as a leader, having interpersonal skills is quite critical, and knowing how to work with a variety of people effectively. For me, it comes back to authenticity. Absolutely, hands down, number one. Being real to yourself, being transparent. So being transparent and ensuring you're providing information and explaining why. So you bring people with you on a journey. That's critical as well.
That's because it's about your own leadership qualities, whether you're at the front or the back or in the middle of the team. So where do you think you are in that? All of them?
Well, look, I think at different times you need different approaches in terms of your leadership. I'm a very visible individual. I believe strongly that you have to be seen, and it's not egocentric. It's about allowing people to know, I have your backs, I'm here for you. So sometimes you do need to lead from the front, but other times, depending on the situation, you'll be leading from the back.
Oh, absolutely. You have to go with the situation, and it's kind of about steering. But again, it depends on the situation, depends on the need. So yeah, it's a lovely answer, and yeah, it's based on common sense, a common sense approach, really. Um, but yes, finger on the pulse, assessing constantly, and being strategic as well, thinking about things, assessing, thinking about steps ahead. And of course, a leader takes risks as well. You have to take risks. And so, yeah, I'm sure you agree that's part of it. We've been talking, we've been through barriers. In the deaf leadership journey, I'm sure you experienced barriers as well. So barriers do come down, and we talk about the glass ceiling. So a lot of deaf people that we ask, we say, what was your moment when you broke through the glass ceiling? Um, so have you got a moment that you felt, this is fantastic. I've achieved my moment and I am through that glass ceiling?
Yeah, what a great question, Craig. When I previously worked in government, I absolutely was aware of the glass ceiling that existed, and it was clearly there. For the last 3 years, working for Deaf Connect, Deaf Connect is deaf led. The board majority are deaf people. My boss is deaf. The executive team is a majority of deaf people. So for me, it's incredible to be working in an organization like this. This should be the norm, but it's not. Many organizations, it's completely different. We see non-deaf people or hearing people leading organizations, whereas in the organization I'm working in, there are multiple deaf people. So in terms of that glass ceiling, I would say it doesn't exist because it's about the skill you have, the job you're in, and it's been a strange experience to actually see this. It's not normal, but it should be normal, right? It's very interesting.
Oh, I understand. I think because you've worked with, deaf leaders who are leaders in their own right. So yeah, if I come in with a complementary question, so talking about deaf leaders and those around us, is there any sense of competitiveness, or is it about collaboration? Um, or camaraderie, solidarity maybe is a good word, or are both present, as they are in the mainstream world, especially in Australia?
I would say in the organization at Deaf Connect, there's a great solidarity within the deaf sector. Um, as I've said before, I think times have changed where it is more competitive and is more commercial. So at times there are different types of relationships. I think we're still in a transition phase in Australia over the next 3 or 4 years, I believe, until it becomes a new normal. And it's this competitive world that we live and operate in. I think we're still in that transition period, and many organizations are having to relearn how to collaborate in this type of climate. So we're going through that phase at the moment.
I think that's a sensible answer, because you're right in, if you're looking at deaf leaders, um, there is a phase, a transformation phase. And I think that's a challenge in itself, but in a positive way, of course. There are negatives, but it's positive to go through transformation. The environment that we're working in is changing. So yeah, it's inevitable. We can't be the same as we were before. Things change, and I think that's a challenge within the deaf sector. Anyway, I want to get on with more questions. So thank you for talking about that. If we talk about your time as president for the Deaf Sports Australia, what was it like for you? What was that experience like? And if you compare yourself to as you were then and, you know, the Deaf Olympics in Australia and that period of your life compared to now. What's your view?
Yes, I mentioned before that I worked for the Melbourne 2005 Deaf Olympics. When that finished, I moved into and joined the board of Deaf Sports Australia. Then, quite soon after that, became the president of Deaf Sports Australia. It was difficult because where do you go from there? Deaf Olympics was finished. What a high! The peak was over. So it was a difficult period in terms of negotiating government funding, and to date, it's still been inadequate. $85,000 a year is all that's received for Deaf Sports Australia, and it's been the same. It hasn't increased with the consumer price index or anything like that. I think it's quite similar to the UK. Similarly, in America, funding for deaf sports is quite terrible. Look, the experience was amazing. The relationships you're able to form with the various sports, football, soccer, cricket, 10-pin bowling. There's such an important history when it comes to sport. People give up 50 years of their life to support their particular sport and passion. So it was an absolute pleasure to work with people in that context. We have a national deaf sporting competition, which we call the Australian Deaf Games, every 2 years, where 20 different sports compete over 1 or 2 weeks, and that's been a tradition. The Taipei Deaf Olympics was another part. You remember that, Craig. I was a president of Deaf Sports Australia, and in Melbourne was the previous Deaf Olympics. So we had to fold up the flag and hand it over to the Taipei Deaf Olympics president. They built a stadium for Deaf Olympics in Taipei. There were 30,000 people there. It was incredible to play a part in that opening ceremony. I believe you've just been voted in as president, Craig, were you? Yeah.
Yeah, the same year. It was inspiring for all the athletes and all the officials like ourselves, you know, who were part of this. It was, you know, national deaf sports organisations, Deaf Sports Australia, UK Deaf Sports. It was a magical moment, that Taipei event, yes. And then suddenly it all went downhill after that. So Deaf Sports Australia, you know, still struggling to get recognition from the Australian government. Is that right? That's ongoing.
Yes, unfortunately, we have the Olympics receive the peak amount of funding. The Paralympics receive a slice of the funding, and Deaf Sports Australia receive a minimal amount. There's been a lot of conversations and advocacy about bringing deaf sports into the Paralympics, but it's not just about the money, it's about our culture and our language, which is a strange juxtaposition. But I was president for 8 years when I got the job at Vic Deaf, so the organisation is now known as Expression Australia. That job was very visible and public. So I decided to step down from my role at Deaf Sports Australia. I didn't want people to get confused. Is this Brent Phillips from Deaf Sports Australia speaking, or Brent Phillips from Expression Australia? So I'm hoping one day to get back into sports. It's in my blood. I absolutely have strong passion for that, but hopefully that'll happen one day soon.
I'm the same as you, but I'm retired from UK Deaf Sports, I say. I am still vice honorary president. I was honorary president for 5 years before that. You know, I was president of the Olympics, and I was UK Deaf Sports chair for 6, 7 years. So, but I think it was time to pass the baton to somebody else to lead. And that's part of leadership, isn't it? You have to know when to pass on and give other people the initiative. So I've done my part, but you're right, it's in my veins. And it's good it's still there for you. And you're still young, younger than me anyway. Okay, so the Deaf Olympics. So Deaf Olympics now compared to then, and also again, the sporting world. The sporting world has changed. The sporting world and participation. We could possibly see Deaf Olympics combining with the Paralympics in terms of shared resources, not a takeover as such, but something that could be considered long term. But it obviously is up to the Deaf Olympics, ICSD, International Committee of Sports. So it is up to them what direction strategically they want to move in. But we have done our part looking back, and you did brilliantly with Melbourne. It really was the peak, and then followed by Taipei. That's over 10 years ago now, well over, but the memories are still there, and the impact is still there. But the impact that we have on the world now is different. We're still facing that.
I absolutely agree with that. Interestingly, recently I read an article by Two Big Ears. Stuart Harrison interviewed the president of Deaf Olympics, if I'm
Yeah,
getting the name.
Adam. Yeah.
And they said in the future, perhaps Deaf Olympics may be more about high elite level participation. So really, when we think of the youth of today, esports, for example, should that be part of Deaf Olympics? I mean, that's leadership. It's proposing new ideas. People will either support or criticize, but he's thinking about the future. And that's a quality of a leader. If we elevate the skill and level of these athletes, will more funding come with this? And when we look at our youth, there's different types of sports that they're playing. Whether or not you agree or disagree with it, he has a vision and he's not afraid to share that vision. I think it's an interesting time.
Yeah, it's his type of leadership, based on his strategy and vision. And I think that strategy and vision can't be achieved overnight. But you're right, it's kind of looking at the next 10, 15 years. And it's possible, but participation, as opposed to elite high performance, that's a challenge. I mean, youth is a good idea. Youth is great. And it does go back to, it's a numbers game, funding, numbers of young people taking part. So that's where the funding comes from. But putting that aside, the vision is good. It's positive. It's something to explore. And I'm sure you'll agree with the philosophy.
Yes, and I think all leaders need to be clear about your vision. Where are you heading? What direction are you taking? And how you communicate that with people is important. Doing that in a transparent way, being open. If you don't share that, how will people join you on that journey? So communication is key in making sure your strategy and your vision is clear.
Yeah, completely agree. And it's interesting you said that, because it could be something, that is achieved. But it brings me back to another question about you again, back to you. So maybe you can tell the audience, as a leader, um, you've got a team with you and around you. How do you support your team through uncertainty? Can you talk about that? I know I've put you on the spot, sorry. But as a leader, how do you support the team through uncertain times?
Yeah, well, I think it goes back to being transparent and acknowledging that you might not know where the end goal is, or that funding is a bit uncertain at the moment. If you hide that, people will cotton on to that, feel uncertain and lose trust. So being honest about the situation, of course, it depends on the situation, the detail, whether it's funding, strategy, or a vision. But again, for me, it comes back to communication and transparency and acknowledging the impact that it'll have on each individual. And that impact will be different. Some people will be saying, great, tell me where we're going, I'm jumping on board. Others will be a lot more nervous, unsure, want more information. So there's a team approach you need to take as a leader, but then also individually, within your team, each person's going to have different needs, and you need to know and acknowledge how you can bring them together and make them function strongly and effectively as a team.
I agree. There's a team and the individuals, and the team is made up of individuals. So that's a really interesting answer. And of course, that brings me on to my next question. If we're talking about change, and change is quite a key word. Sometimes it's popular, sometimes it isn't. It depends on the members of your team, maybe, and people you work with. So, what would be your advice to the public, audience members, when we're thinking about change within deaf leadership?
Yeah. Interestingly, the word leadership and the word deaf, or the concept deaf leadership, does it mean because you're deaf, you need to always talk about deaf leadership? I do wonder, when we say deaf leadership and leadership, what are the differences? But Craig, share with me the question again. Managing change, was it?
Yeah, so if you're a leader and you're experiencing changes, whether it's deaf leadership or leadership, however you want to phrase it, but you as a leader are experiencing changes, and because of that experience, what would you advise others about the change that you've been through?
Yeah, I'm not sure of what your sign is, but adaptability. Yeah, okay, it's the same sign. There you go. Adaptability. You have to plan for what you know and plan for what you don't know. And there will always be unexpected journeys or unexpected diversions you have to take. And that's not easy. Some people like a black and white approach. They like everything to be clearly laid out and that roadmap to be as clear as possible, where others are happy to respond and adjust based on the circumstances that are being dealt with. So, as a leader, you might like one or the other, but you have to be prepared for both. Be prepared for what you've planned and know, but also be prepared for those unexpected changes and moments where you have to pivot and change direction.
That's a good answer, good advice, because yeah, you have to be prepared and plan for the unexpected, but also planning for something that's expected, how to do it, being gentle, being sensitive. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for that advice to others. Yeah, you're right. It's really important. And again, your experience as a leader, I shouldn't put that in inverted commas. I know I did inverted commas there. You are a leader in the first place, but as a leader, obviously you have experience of handling difficult, challenging people. Could you tell us a little bit of how you've managed to deal with, should we say, challenges? Not difficult, but challenging people.
Well, my journey, I've come across challenging people, certainly. Um, you can't avoid those situations. I think the older you get, the more thick-skinned perhaps you are. When you were younger, you might have tried to be friends with people or be friends with everyone and be a bit more sensitive to others. But if you're true to yourself and you have a a strong moral compass, if you come across a difficult person, as long as you're true to yourself, I think that's really key for me. And it comes with wisdom, I would say, in how best to approach that. But looking back, absolutely, there have been difficult people I've had to deal with, and my response has changed over the years in how I deal with that. I guess, yeah, I would say it's experience, it's time, and confidence. The younger me would have found those situations more challenging, whereas now I have more solid groundings in my belief and where I'm going and how I deal with those situations.
That's interesting. And basing it on your journey, it shows that you've learnt, you've become more proactive rather than reactive. So, you use the word wisdom, resilience, being thick-skinned. These are all great things in dealing with problems. And of course, you've got qualities that you've learned from your role models and mentors, and it's all becomes part of your journey. Is that right?
Certainly, I think one of the challenges that exist for me, I work and live in the same community. So it is one world. I work with people, and some of those people are my friends or they're my family, or we have a history of working together in the past. So it's not like a person that works a 9 to 5 job, they clock off and they socialize and live in a completely different ecosystem or world. So those conflicts exist. And I think we're all here for the same reason. We all want the community to be better. We want a better world for deaf people. And that's the goal that brings us together. But it might be difficult. It is difficult because we exist in that one bubble. And I think that's something we have to acknowledge.
Interesting, you use the term bubble. And you're in the deaf community, but you also work within the deaf community. And yeah, there's that overlap there. And your professional and personal and family life is all merged, and your friends as well. So lots of people face that kind of similar issue. I mean, there's lots of deaf leaders who go through that. So it's interesting that you've got that experience as well. Okay, I am very conscious of time and we don't have long left, and there are some questions coming into the chat. So from your perspective, your view, what's the difference between leadership and management? Can you talk about your perspective on that?
Yes, I think it's an old question, the differences between leadership and management, but they do go hand in hand, I would say, at times. My role, I'm a visible leader, but I also manage a team. I manage a work plan. I have KPIs. My team has KPIs. There are performance measures. So you have to manage that aspect. You have to manage a team. Um, I think in terms of leadership, that's about your vision, your long-term vision, where you want to go. What's that big picture? To get there, and to work in organizations, you have to have management skills, reporting structures, managing budgets, achieving a KPI. So my view is that they both go hand in hand, and there are different skills. Some people are great managers, but not good leaders in terms of creating a vision, articulating that vision. They're more good with the day-to-day business. Some people are great with creating a vision and articulating a vision, but struggle with the day-to-day management that comes with it. It is a significant skill, and it's difficult to have both. I think, Craig, you've got both, but it's certainly not easy. And that's something you're able to develop often with time.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. And my perspective is very similar to yours. And I think it's rather rare to have both qualities in one box. So people don't say it's rare. People say it's quite common, but I think truly it is a rarity, because management itself is about a trained role. But also it comes naturally for some qualities. I mean, you see, like, with personality tests, they would go through for leaders. And they often ask questions, based on your skills, your experience, your qualities, personality types, MBTI, the Myers-Briggs. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, we're talking the same language here.
Yeah.
So what's your view on that?
I'm ISTG, I believe. I've done it a couple of times.
ENJF, maybe, I don't know.
Oh, okay. So introvert for I. Yes, I think
I'm an E.
over time, yeah, you've become more of an extrovert, I think, Stuart Craig.
But I think having an exchange like this means that there's a common thing in leadership. We talk about management, but personality tests. But I did want to ask you a personal view. Do you think personality tests are a useful exercise, for yourself, but also as an organization?
Yes, I would say it's useful if you know how to use the data that comes from it, not do the test and then put it in the top drawer and never refer to again. I have done the Myers-Briggs test 2 or 3 times, also the 360 feedback process, where my boss provides feedback, my team provides feedback, so my colleagues, and then my reports. I've done that twice, and that's had significant impact. And it's quite raw, but you have to be mindful, or you have to be mentally prepared to hear that feedback. Have you done a 360 feedback process before, Craig? Yeah, it's
Oh,
fantastic. It's very, very useful. And it's important to then think, what's next? What support do you have to ensure you can plan and become a better person with the data you get from these initiatives?
yeah, I don't know what other people's view are, but the 360 is like ripping you apart. You're really open to other people's perspective, and that's quite challenging. So, last question for you, and then I can see some questions coming in from the audience. Hold on to those. But what are your plans now into the future? For deaf leadership as a whole, what are your thoughts?
Wow. A great, great question. I would say I'm still on my journey and I will always be learning. I still meet incredible people that are young or, very experienced that I constantly learn from. At the moment, work and family are my focuses, particularly my family. I've got 2 young children, similar to you, family time is really important for me. I'm also mindful about how I can pay it forward. So I was fortunate to grow up with great people around me that gave me their time, shared their skills, and supported me. There are young people that I see that I've met that I make sure I take the time to invest in them, meet with them for coffee, and share that knowledge and experience with them. Some of them are working with me. Some people are outside the organization, but I ensure that I look for opportunities to support them. Youth is a big passion of mine. I know I'm older now, but deaf youth, I will give any amount of my time, that I'm not limited to the amount that I will provide in supporting youth and paying it forward for the future of our community.
Ruth, you're right, youth is an important. If you're looking at mentoring that you've had, role models that you've seen, and you want to give something back, so you can pass on that experience that you had of having a mentor to youth. Yeah, so it's a big job. Do you think?
Absolutely, and I think you have to make the time, and it's worthwhile because the time was given to me from others over my life. So I need to pass that on, and hopefully they'll continue that legacy. It's a part of the deaf community. It's the value that we have in our community, our culture, our language, and it's about sharing that and passing it on through the generations. In terms of mentors, I have a mentor currently who's not a deaf person. They've got nothing to do with the deaf sector. They are in the C-suite level for an international corporation, a large, significant organization. We have valuable conversations. It's that deaf bubble. We exist in, when you can have someone that you can lean on that is not a part of that world. I really encourage deaf leaders to have, yes, your deaf mentors, but also find people from outside the deaf community that know nothing about the deaf world. And you can get a lot from those people.
Yeah, I agree with your important advice there. I do have a mentor, and it doesn't matter where they're from. It's the fact that they're there to give you, they're your critical friend. if you like. And that is really important. And it helps just to try and think about how you can change, how you can make next steps. So it's great that you've got that. And I do think that's very important. And for other deaf leaders to also have that experience, because you're functioning in a high level role, the pressure is there as well, of course. You know, there's no denying that part. But I'd say it's positive pressure. I'm trying to say it's positive pressure. Okay, Brent. Um, I mean, all your answers have been so fantastic. We've got a few minutes left, so I'm just looking through some of the brilliant questions we've had. If I feed those back to you. So, how do work colleagues develop skills, to become where you are now at executive level? How can, we encourage other deaf people to follow and reach their dream goals?
Yeah, a great question. I would say there's not necessarily one simple answer. Each person has different skills and a different path ahead of them. For me, I would say it's important to have people that believe in you around you, that can provide you the right support. So having the right support network around you is key. And working for the right organizations that are authentically committed to deaf leadership, that for me at Deaf Connect is key. I feel valued. So that's important to think about. I think some of those, some of those aspects.
Yeah.
Great question.
Yeah, good question. Brilliant answer. Thank you. So next question, what's your biggest challenge as a Chief Impact Officer at Deaf Connect Australia?
I mentioned before that the deaf sector in Australia is in a period of transition from the previous model of welfare to more commercial. Are the deaf community prepared for that? I wouldn't say they are. That there's some portions of the community that are holding on to the history and the way things used to be. That's certainly a challenge. Whilst we live in a world now of highly competitive business, we have to work together as a community, and that's key. How we work with Deaf Australia, which is like your BDA, ours is Deaf Australia, how we support them and their work to better advocate and support our community. So it's an interesting time here in Australia in terms of the politics in the deaf community. So it is certainly about how we can best work together as a community.
Can you see me okay? I went off for a moment there. Um, I um, Thank you. I do have another question. Oh, there's quite a lot of questions now. I've only got 2 minutes left. Okay. So, what about succession planning? What do you have to make sure the deaf community can become leaders one day? So succession planning, what's in the pipeline for the deaf community in Australia in order to pass on the leadership legacy?
Right. My work at Deaf Connect, we do have succession plans for key roles in the organization. All organizations must have some thought to that. Deaf Connect are investing in deaf leadership. We have programs, training related to leadership. We have governance. I'm not sure what your sign for governance is, but governance. Okay. In terms of building deaf people's skills to be able to sit on boards and manage organizations. So we've been delivering those courses to date, and we will continue to do that. So we're able to build a pipeline of different deaf people that are able to participate in leadership roles. So it's not only about me, it's about who's next. And we're very much invested in that.
I agree. That's a good answer. There is somebody joining us from Indonesia, from West Java. The question they've written is so long. If I summarize it for you, um, you know, how about, are you open to collaboration for somebody in Indonesia? Yes or no would be a good enough answer. Oh, sorry, I'll go back a bit. I've shortened the question. It was somebody joining us from Indonesia, from West Java. And their question to you is, would you be open to collaboration with the deaf community there? Yes or no?
Certainly. I'm happy for my email address to be shared. So if anyone here wants to make contact with me to have a conversation or a follow-up question, I'm happy for Craig, you to pass that information on. You can follow me on LinkedIn. You can connect with me there. In Australia, we're always mindful that we are a big country and we're well funded. So in terms of our responsibility, supporting the Pacific Islands and Asia Pacific region is certainly front of mind for us. So yes, please reach out. Look forward to chatting further.
Brilliant. Thank you. Time does seem to have beaten us. So I'm sorry to the people I haven't relayed the question to. They were all fantastic questions. Brent, thank you so much. It's been amazing to have the conversation with you today. It was fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. Must be past midnight for you now in Australia, but it's been fantastic. All that you've told us about on your deaf leadership journey. I have picked up a few words quickly to summarize. You've talked about honesty and integrity. You talked about authenticity. Uh, and you've also talked about doing things with sensitivity, transparency, honesty, and being impactful in a quiet way. So that's the summary I've got of what we've talked about and the keywords that I've written down. So wow, you've had such an experience and a journey, and I want to wish you all the best for whatever comes next in your journey. So thank you so much for your time, Brent.
Oh, what an absolute pleasure, Craig. I got a soft place for the UK in my heart, and I really miss and think of you all fondly. So thank you for having me here, and thank you for asking me to join you all today.
Pleasure. It's been great. Okay, so we have Sophia from Bulgaria, giving our being our next guest. So look out from the details from us, UK Deaf Leadership Summit webinar series. Thank you so much to the audience members for watching. This has been recorded, so it will be available and can be shared publicly. Okay, thanks again, Brent. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.